Alright, so in this part we are going to cover the NgRx walkthrough tutorial that is part of the official ngrx.io website. So this comes after the getting started tutorial. This one is a bit more complex, so handling a bit more advanced subjects related to the store, so the case of having multiple stores, etc. Alright, so for this tutorial they are providing two different links. Okay, so the first one is this one. It's a StackBlitz link, so when you click on it, it will open StackBlitz, which is kind of a Visual Studio Code. It's an IDE in the browser. So when you will launch it, it will automatically install the dependencies. However, you might face some issues with the server starting. So for that, you'll just launch ngserve or npm start. Okay, so while waiting for it, then when the tutorial starts, so the first thing that they give you is the final result you're supposed to reach when you're done with the tutorial. Okay, and then when you start here, they will give you another link, which is the one I opened here. Okay, and this one, same, you might face the same issue. So after installing the dependencies, it might struggle to start. So you will also launch ngserve. Let's see if this one started. Fine. Now let's also launch ngserve in this one. Okay, so these are the two projects that you have, the final result you're supposed to reach, and the starting point, which is a very simple Angular app, so kind of a generated app with the ngnew CLI command, but with all the dependencies that you need to work with the store. All right, so mainly NgRx store, and in our case we will also need the store dev tools, even though it's not required by the tutorial. But I like to always have the store dev tools because it allows to properly understand how the store behaves behind the scene in terms of actions and state, etc. All right, so for that I have the Redux Dev Tools Chrome extension installed, so you can get it from the Chrome Web Store. Make sure to get the official one. All right, and when for our use case, I will not be doing the tutorial in StackBlitz. You can if you want, but I will be doing it in Visual Studio Code because it's more convenient. You can have the Angular Language Service extension installed, which allows you to, for example, control click from the template and access the property in the TS file, or control click on a component and directly access to that component. So it's kind of convenient. So for that, I prefer to use my local environment. For to use the Redux Dev Tools, you can do so. Yeah, I missed to mention that I will work locally, meaning I will also launch locally the two projects, which is what I have here. They are already both launched. Okay, we'll have a look at them. So in case you want to work with StackBlitz, I strongly encourage you at least to open the embedded browser here in a separate tab, so that you can benefit from the Redux Dev Tools on that app. All right, so for example, you can open it like this. All right, and since it is, oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah, so I strongly encourage you to open it like this, so that you can benefit from the Redux Dev Tools. Here they are not enabled because we need to change that in the in the app module.ts, we need to configure the store dev tools there. But when we will cover that in this session. But yeah, at least try to have the tab open separately so that you can benefit from the dev tools when we will inspect, and we can open the store and everything. All right, so for now we don't have the store related to this app because the Redux Dev Tools are not enabled. The store dev tools module is not imported in the app module and configured accordingly. All right, so yeah, so for now we can, yeah, so the app we are going to reach, I will show you in the other tabs, but for now I can get rid of these tabs, okay, because I am not going to work with stack bleeds, but you can do the same for your case. So here we have, let me put this one first. Here we have the final result we want to reach, okay. Let me just remove the work from, remove parts here that we will do them later. No, this has to stay. I will remove those dev tools so that I can show you what you need to do to import the dev tools. So because the project initially doesn't have them. All right, let's see for this one as well. Okay, this one doesn't have them, so that's perfect. All right, so I have two VS Code, as I said. One is called NgRx walkthrough start, which is, as I said, the generated app, which with the Redux, the NgRx store package.json, and the NgRx walkthrough final, which is that other link. Yeah. So by the way, if you want to download those projects, I missed to mention that when you open the Stack Bleeds project, you just click on this icon, okay, download project, and it will download the project in your environment, in your computer. Then you can open that folder with VS Code or your favorite IDE. Okay, let's close that. So yeah, to access the tutorial, you just go through ngrx.io, okay, and you click on get started, and then you go to walkthrough. Okay, that's the tutorial that we are going to cover. Perfect. So here are both projects that are here, and they are both started in different ports. So the final one is started on the default port, which is 4200, and the starting point is on a random port that was given by ngserve 57011. Okay, here are both of them. All right, so in the next part we're going to see what the final result contains, how it behaves, how to configure the store dev tools, and everything else. So in this part we are going to have a look at the app that we are supposed to reach after the tutorial. So this app, when loaded for the first time, makes an API call. So let me refresh. So you see that we have an API call made to Google Books API with some query parameters, and the result is a JSON object which has a property called items. So the property items consists on an array of a bunch of objects, which each of them represent books with a bunch of information such as the authors, etc. Okay, so when this API call is being made, an action is being dispatched, again without any action from the user, just at the load of the app. To see that, we can see it in the Redux Dev Tools, so which can be buggy from time to time. Yeah, here, no, sorry, the Dev Tools are not being enabled. So for us to enable the Dev Tools, you'll have to go to Developer Tools and NgRx Store Dev Tools installation. Okay, and here we need to add the dependency add NgRx Store Dev Tools latest. All right, which will update the package.json and which will get download the dependency by doing the equivalent of an npm install. All right, by doing an npm install behind the scene. And then we need to update our src app module the module of the app module, the imports array. We need to import in it the store dev tools module and configure it appropriately. All right, so for our use case, we will not need to add the dependency, because if you will look into the project as you will download them or work on them on StackBleeds, you will see, if you open their package.json, both the starting point and the other one, that they already have the NgRx store dev tools dependency. All right, so if I open, for example, this is the NgRx walkthrough final, the one that we are looking at, and it already has the store dev tool. So we don't need to, since I already launched npm install, obviously I also have the dev tools downloaded in the node modules. So we won't have to run the ng-add module. However, we will need to, in the app.module.ts, that's what I removed actually in the previous part to show you what you need to do. We'll need here to add in the imports array the store dev tools module. Okay, there is this isDevMod function that we need to import from Angular core. Okay, this is to say that we are not in developer mode to only log, but not enable the NgRx dev tools that work with the Chrome extension. And the max age is how many actions it will store in the history of the dev tools. So you'll understand when we look at the dev tools in the Chrome dev tools. All right, so we need to import the store dev tools module. Unfortunately, here it's not helping. Okay, but we already know that it's part of that dependency called NgRx store dev tools that we have just seen in the package.json. So let's just copy this to save some time. Let's import the store dev tools module and let's import them from the store dev tools. All right, we need a comma here. Now, when we will come back to the browser, we see that the icon now is green, sorry, and we can see the state here of the store, etc. So as you can see, when the app is being loaded, the API call is made, and then there is an action that is being dispatched, retrieved book list, that will take whatever result we got from that API call, meaning in terms of items, and it will take whatever data it needs from, and then an action will be dispatched, and what we call the payload of the action is that list of books. All right, and that action obviously will update the state. So the book state is actually empty in the beginning, it's an empty array, and then as you see all of that in green, it means the change of state after the action was dispatched. So meaning we added 5 elements to that array. Okay, so the current state at this part is like this. If we come before, you see that books is doesn't have anything. Okay, it's not even an empty array. It looks like it's undefined. And then when the action is dispatched, at this stage we have our state with that array of 5 books. All right. Now that's part of the feature of this app. Another feature is the add to collection. Okay, so when we add to collection, you see that there are actions that are being dispatched, add books, and I clicked on this add collection and then the other one, so they send the ID. All right, they send the ID as a payload of the book that we clicked on. So you see there are 2 different IDs because I clicked on this one and then on that one I can add this one also. We can see it here, and the state changes. All right, now the collection has 3 items. We don't need the full array of books. The ID is enough. We can get the full data of the books from the books part of the store. It's actually better to avoid duplicating data so that you have always one single source of truth in one part of the store, and the rest you can refer to it using IDs, the same as you would work with the database and the keys in a database. All right, then the other type of action that can be dispatched is remove from collection. So you see we have actions that are being dispatched and we can see the difference that they make. You see here it's red. We are removing elements from the collection, whereas this one we're adding elements to that collection array. So it removed these parts. So that's why it's very important, even though they don't mention it in the tutorial. Both by the way, even in the part that covered where was it, the tutorial about yeah, here it was, the part that covered the initial tutorial, which is quite simple. I suggested to install the dev tools. Same for the walkthrough. We need to install the dev tools to properly understand and see in a visual way what is happening in the store, so that we can properly understand it. All right, we can even try playing with the store before some actions are being dispatched from our code. We can manually dispatch them using the dispatcher here and see the impact on the store and going through the reducers, etc. We'll look into that. Okay, so that's the goal that we want to reach. So at the end, we want to have an app that will make that API call to Google Books API to get with the proper query params to get that list of books. Then immediately after that, we want to dispatch an action with those books as a payload that will update the state with the books. Okay, then we want to see those books in our UI. That's where we will use selectors and subscribe to the observable that is provided by the selector. All right, and we want to have user-defined actions, because the first one that we saw is not really user-defined because it's happened at the load of the app. So we want to have some buttons that are hooked with some methods in the class file that when we trigger them will dispatch the appropriate actions. So in that case, it will be the add book with the ID of the book that we clicked on, and for the removal, remove book with as a payload the ID of the book that we removed. All right, here also we want to read from the part of the store that's called collection in this part, because as you have seen, when we add them, we are automatically seeing here those books that were added in the collection. And we want to implement the logic, which would be in the reducers, that when we click on add collection, when this action is being dispatched, we want actually to add that ID to the collection, and when a remove is being clicked here, we want to remove from that array. So this work will be in the reducers. Okay, so yeah, so this walkthrough will cover the select part of the store with some selectors and the few reducers and actions and multiple parts of the store, because in this case we have books and collections, whereas in the previous store it was just one store which was just one counter, and that counter was just a number, so it was not even an array or JSONs or whatever. And the actions that were being dispatched in the previous tutorial, in the getting started tutorial, didn't even have a payload. So here it's a bit like more advanced than the previous one. Okay, so yeah, so as we mentioned, this is the final result we want to reach, and we are going to start from this. So from this empty Angular app to this functionality that involves the store. Perfect. So one thing that we need to mention regarding when we imported the store dev tools module, be very careful to import it after the store module. Okay, if you are going to do it in the final example, or even in the starting point, when we are at some point we are going to need to import the store module. So this needs to be after. If it's before, we cannot get it. All right, we cannot get the store. So you see, the dev tools are disabled, okay, and we don't see the state of the store or nothing. All right, that's because it was imported before the store module. So it needs to be imported after. That's very important, because if you don't do it this way, it will be very hard, if you don't know that, to find out that this is the reason. So now the DevTools are green, and we can see the store and the actions that was dispatched at load. Perfect. So now that we have everything set up, meaning both the final example and the starting point, the final example would not need it much, or maybe not at all. It was mainly to show you what is the objective we want to reach. So we could even close the tab and the other VS Code window, but let's just keep it open just in case. And yeah, we can start with the tutorial. Perfect. So this is the link to the StackBlitz project that we downloaded, that we got this from. All right, so as I mentioned, let's minimize this. This is the project. As I mentioned, this is an empty app. It has absolutely nothing. App component.ts that is empty, an HTML that has only that h1 title that you saw in this browser. Okay, absolutely nothing. So it's it looks like just a generated Angular app, with the only exception that it has some NgRx dependencies. Okay, we'll not need all of them. We're not gonna work with effects or entity or router store in these cases. Okay, nor with NgRx schematics. So mainly the store dev tools, but this is already covered. We needed them to enable that extension from Chrome. By the way, the extension is, you can find it under the Chrome Web Store. So you just type Redux Dev Tools, and as I said, be careful. Okay, even though the icon you see that I was showing looks like this, be careful not to open that one. You clearly see that it has only 3 ratings. You need to take that one, okay, the Redux one, which has like 728 at the time of the video. So the author, yeah, the author is Redux Dev Tools. All right, so that's the kind of official one. Okay, it's even mentioned, if you want to remove any dots, I think it's mentioned under developer tools here when they speak about that. Yeah, they talk about download the Redux Dev Tools extension. So there is a link here that takes you to Redux. So here it's agnostic of the framework. Huh? It's whether it's NgRx for Angular or Redux for plain JavaScript, it will work. So that's why the extension, it's kind of a, Redux is kind of a standard, so the extension is agnostic as long as it gets the information it needs. So here you will have a link for Chrome, so it will directly take you to the Chrome Web Store. Okay, so you see that's that extension that we open. So here the icon is green, but that's the one with 728 rating, with offered by Redux Dev Tools. So it seems like they have changed the icon when you Redux Dev Tools. Yeah, actually in the results it shows like this, but when you click on it, it shows like this. So be careful not to confuse it with the second result. To remove any doubt, as we have just shown, you go from the NgRx official website, under developer tools, NgRx store dev tools overview. Then you click on download Redux Dev Tools extension. It will take you to their GitHub project, and then you click on the link for Chrome. Okay, it will avoid to have any doubt. So that's the one that I have installed in my browser. All right, so in the tutorial they are asking us to create a folder called book list. All right, let's do that. So under the app folder, we'll create a folder called book list. Then they ask us to create a file called books.model.ts. So this file is nothing but, it will contain nothing but an interface which will define the model that we want to have for books inside our app. So for example, the model that comes from the API, it's good that we kept the tab open, might be richer than what we want. Okay, it might contain far more information. You see, we don't need all those information, so we will have our own model for our app for just what we need. Oops, sorry. Let's copy the model. Here it is. Here we are. So we need a model that will have an ID and an object called volume info, which has title and authors. That's it. Perfect. And if you notice, that represents actually the model that we will have in the books here. Okay, actually not. So it's interesting because the model that we have in the store here is richer and looks more like what we have in the yeah. So sorry, that's the model. Actually, it seems like it's the model that is for the UI. So in the store, we will put all the data that's provided by the API, so that raw data, and that model book with just ID, volume info, title, and authors, sorry, is the model that we need to display in the browser, in the UI. Okay, so the title, the authors, here there is only one. Okay, and the ID, obviously, because the UI, when we click on add collection, as you have seen, we dispatch an action with the ID. So the UI will need the IDs to add or remove the proper book from to add it to and remove it from the collection. All right, so that's why we are creating this this model. Fine, so let's save this. Let's come back to the tutorial, and then we start on the interesting stuff related to the store. So they ask us to create a folder state, as you can see here. Let's do that also under the app folder. So you see that interestingly, that model is not related to the store. They told us to put it under the book list because it's the UI model. It's not the model that is stored in the state, in the NgRx store, right? However, everything that will be under the state is everything related to the store. Then we create a file. So we'll start with actions and the reducers, okay? And here in this case, since we have two parts of the store, one related to books and one related to reducers, they decided to separate them in two reducers, whereas in two reducer file, I should say. In the case of the actions, they kept everything, even though add books and remove books we can consider them related to the collection because it's to add or remove to the collection, and this one adds only to the books part because that's the one that we got from the API call. So it could have been in two different files, okay, but they decided to group them here, to group all of them, but to separate the books and collections reducers. I mean, it's fine, but usually for each reducer file has its own action files, okay? They are already separated, as you can see, so these actually looks more the ones that impact the collection, whereas this one is the one that impacts the bookstore, the one that we get from the API. And these ones are separated by files, but they could stay in the same file and be separated just by constant, but anyway. All right, so, and then we will configure our app to use that store by referring to the reducer and to the different reducers and giving them IDs. So that's the next steps. Okay, as a reminder, so the actions are dispatched by component. I mean, not necessarily by component, they can be dispatched also by services. This diagram is trying to kind of make it simple, but in our use case, indeed, the action will be dispatched by the component, but it's not necessity. And then the action will reducer will be called by the store when the action will be dispatched. Okay, so that reducer is going to update the store, and we are going to read from the store using selectors. So for our part now, we want to write in the store, so we'll focus on actions and reducers, and later we will want to read from the store, so we will write our selectors later. Perfect. So that's just a quick reminder on actions and reducers. Coming back to the tutorial, so let's create our books.actions.ts file under the state folder, and let's create our books.reducer.ts file in the same folder. All right, let's copy the content of the actions, and let's take a minute to have a look at it. So as you can see here, we have two constants, okay? These are functions, okay, that will when called will they will return to us the appropriate action, actually, when we will call this.dispatch and the action that we want from here. We will get our action that we can dispatch. Okay, so here we're immediately creating an action group. In the previous tutorial, we were using create action because we had only one. We had actions, individual actions, if you recall, increment and decrement and reset. Here we are creating using create action groups to create them kind of in one shot. Okay, so here are the actions that will impact the collection store. So they call them books action. Maybe they should have called them collections action, because add book will add to the collection and remove book will remove from the collection. They don't impact that books part of the store. If you noticed, if I uncheck this action to have always the latest state, when we click on add or remove, when these actions are being dispatched, they never impact these parts. Okay, they impact the collection parts. Okay, if you can see their diff, you see it's always the collection that's impacted. So for me, this should have be prefixed with collection. And this one, books API, it's the one that is related to the books, because when we get them from the API, we add them to the books, and that's it. It doesn't move unless we refresh the app to recall the API and re-update. All right, but anyway, they called that part, the actions that impact that part, books API, and the other one, they called it books. All right, so yeah, so here we define the add book and remove book. So we give them we give them a string which will identify them, and here there is this source to that's actually what will automatically, as I mentioned in the video related to the getting started, we have kind of a convention in NgRx or in Redux in general, to have the parts of the store that are impacted by a group of actions under prefix. It was done also in the previous one. Here it will automatically be done by the create action group. We put source, so automatically the name that will be created will be double square brackets books and then add book or remove book. Here this is for books API. And then this is what we call the payload. So previous tutorial about increment, decrement didn't have any payload. Here it's a bit richer, so we have a payload. So this is the props that we see here. So in this case, it's the book ID only. All right, for adding or removing, that's the only thing we need. And for the case of the books API, the payload is the real books, not just the ID, not just the IDs of the books. So the books that we got actually from that model. Okay, I mean, since you see here, actually the model is also used in the model that's the model that we defined for the UI, right? Which is quite light. Okay, and that's the model that is being dispatched by this retrieve book list. However, JavaScript is quite flexible. That's why even though you saw that model that model was quite light, here we see all the information that we got from the API. Okay, it's because the API will take the same object as long as they're compatible. The object that we got from the API, the same object, the same reference that will be passed. That's why it has more data that is in the model that we are using actually, and that is passed in the payload. So the model here is not restrictive. Okay, it means that at least we should have an ID, volume info, title, and authors, but we can have more. And in that case, they passed a richer object. That's what makes us have more than what we need in the store. Okay, that's because of JavaScript. All right, so yeah, so here the books is an array, read-only array, and yeah, because we cannot actually update the store manually, so everything has to go through dispatching action to be able to update the store. So the store will do that. So a read-only array of books that are following that model. All right, so now we created all those files, but they're not hooked up with our app. So to link them with our app, we need to do some work in the app module. All right, and the work that we need to do is and they will tell us to it here. They'll tell us here. We need to import the store module and configure it with the reducers that we need and associate them with some sorry, before that, yeah, I missed that we didn't yet work on the reducers. So let's copy the reducers. This is the final example. Yeah. Let's copy the reducers. All right. So so here we have an initial state. Okay, that's for the, oops, my bad. This is the, I copied the wrong one. We have actually two reducers. This is the books reducer. This is what I should have copied. All right, and I missed to create the file for collection reducer before. All right, and let's copy the collection reducer. Okay, let's go to the books reducer, which is the first one. So here we have an initial state, okay, which shows what is the state of that part of the store related to books. So here it's a read-only array of books that is an empty array, okay. And here we call the create reducer function, to which we pass the initial state and all the logic that we need to do on each action that is being dispatched. It happens that for the case of the books, we have only one action, which is the books API's action, okay. This one, all right. Let's come back. So on the dispatch of that action, here is what we need to do. We have our previous state. We got our books because if you remember, this actions has props or payload. That is an object that has a books property, which is an array. That's what we have seen here. You see, the payload is an object that has a books property, which is the array of books. All right. So we take those props here. Okay, we do here object destructuring to have those books, and the new state is actually the books. Okay, so you'll see in many cases actually we are changing the state, but here we are completely overriding it. So when we got that list, because it's only done at load and at the initial load of the app, the array is empty, so we know that we can just override it. All right, otherwise it could have been something like this. All right, an array with the spread annotation, and then we add the books. It would issue here, yeah, because it's an array. Sorry. Sorry, that's not one item actually, so I need to use the spread annotator of both of them, because this is an array that we got actually. Okay, so yeah, so we could have done that. It would have had the same effect, because because this action is actually dispatched only at load, and at load it's always empty, so we are actually adding those books there. But actually what they want to do is to completely override that array. So even if it had something initially here, it would have been removed and overridden by this array of books. Okay, but as I said, in usually we change the state this way. Okay, but nothing prevents us to completely reset it. Okay, like actually in the previous example of the getting started, there is that reset, there is increment and decrement, which actually increments and decrements the state, so it changes it. And there was the reset, which didn't change it, completely put it back to 0. Okay, so you can consider this one as a reset. Okay. Okay, so this is the reducer that will put the books in the books part of the store. All right. Now let's look at the ones that will impact the collections part of the store. So yeah, I missed to mention that here we are referring to the action, right? That is part of the actions file that we created. Okay. So here is the action, and it will automatically create action group will automatically create from the string the property that is part of this group by using camel case from this string. All right, that's why you see this retrieved book lists. Okay, so that's one additional convenience of the create action group, is that we don't need to repeat that prefix everywhere with the square brackets. We can just put it here and it will automatically add it, and we don't need to create the name of the constant for each action. Okay, so for example, if I added an S here, you see it cannot find it. So you clearly see when I do the auto completion, it proposes the S. So it deducted actually the name of the constant for the action from that string of the type of the action. All right, this is what we call the type, and this is what we call the payload. These are the two main part of an action. So let's put the name back as before, and here we should remove this. All right, so yeah, this is how a reducer works. Now let's look at the collection reducer. So here we have a reducer, but in this case we have the logic that needs to be executed on each action, the remove book and the add book. So you see that here we had only one, but you could have as many as you want. All right, so same thing here, we have initial state, right, for the collection. So it's a read-only array, but here it's of string instead of books, because the books are already stored in the books array, so there is no reason to repeat them. Actually it's discouraged, okay, to avoid messing up with the data. So we keep the data in one place only, and then we refer to it with the IDs. So the string here are for the IDs, right, because IDs are strings. And so we have our collection reducer, and we use the create reducer function from the NgRx store. We passed with the initial state, which is the empty array, and here we have the ons, okay, that are also imported from the NgRx store. We import the book action, which is book actions, which is the group that we created here, all right, and that one will propose to us either the remove book or the add book. Okay, so for the remove book, we are getting the state. So here we will do a change on the state. We're not gonna reset the state or override the state completely as done here. Okay, so we know already that the remove book and the add book, their payload is, or their props is the ID only, right? So we are getting our ID here. We deconstruct, we use object destructuring to get the book ID here, and we have the state, right? Then what we do, we will filter from the state, meaning we will keep only the state. As we said, it's an array of strings, right? We'll keep only the IDs that do not equal to the book ID here, right? So if the book ID was there, right, we would if the book ID was there, we would come here and remove it actually from the array. Okay, so we keep, so the filter array operators array operator, the conditions that needs to be fulfilled here is the one that stays after the filter. All right, so meaning the IDs that are different from the book ID. All right, and for the add book, what we do is we get our book ID here from the props. We check if our array, which is the state is an array. If our array, here they used index of book ID to see if there is an index, and then more than -1. Here, I assume what they wanted to say to check is whether the array does not contain the ID. So when the array does not contain the ID, we return the same state. Okay, sorry, if the state is more than -1, meaning 0 or 1 or whatever, meaning if the array contains the ID, we return the same array. Otherwise, we append it, all right, in the array here by using that spread annotation for the arrays, all right, because we don't want, if the ID already exists, we don't want to add it again, all right. Otherwise, what we'll end up with is, when I added this one, seeing voices in the collection, if I click on it, it will keep adding it, all right. We don't want that. All right, so that's why we do that check. Okay. They could have used includes, which in my opinion would have been simpler. All right, includes and book ID, it would have been more functional. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the reducer. So now that we have our actions and our reducers, what we can do, what we have to do is go register, import the store module and register the reducers while doing that import. So the way we do that is this way. Okay, we import the store module. Here we don't need to do the imports, the IDE should help us do it. So let's go in our app module, all right, and import our store module. Let's do the JavaScript import. Two types of import here. There is the NgModule import, so the import of the Angular module, and the import of the JavaScript store module. So let's add all missing import here to import our reducers. And you see here that we are defining two parts for the store using these ones. Okay, it's very important. So what you write here, books collection, is what you will see in the store dev tools in the state. All right, in the state here, what you see, by the way, just something very important, when you play with the Redux Dev Tools, if you click on an action, what you will see in the state is the state at the time after that action was dispatched. Okay, so if you want to see the latest state, you'll click on the last action. The problem is that when you keep dispatching actions, that one keeps being selected. So you see, even though I removed these two, I still see two here in the collection because I'm still at that state here. So if you want to always see the latest version of the state, you click again on that action that is selected. Now, whatever happens, we always see the exact last state because no action is selected. So by default, it will show the latest state. All right. So we see that books and collections, these names that you see here, are exactly these two names. Okay, so whatever name we put here, this is what we'll see there. Okay, so it's very important. If you want to change the names of your stores, this is where you do it. Okay, when we are registering the slices of the store. All right, so now if we save, everything should work. So, but we don't have any UI yet, so that's very interesting part. So now let's come back to the tutorial. Here in our console log we don't have any compilation error, otherwise it would have shown also in the browser. Let's open the DevTools. Okay, under Redux Dev Tools, here what you see here, actually it's a kind of a bug of the extension. It's when we don't have the store here, because we clearly don't have it yet, because we didn't import the store DevTools module will do it. That's why it's not green, right? This one is green, this one is not, but you see that it's still showing some store. This is coming from the other tab. Okay, so something is messed up where they are storing with local storage, because the hosts are the same, only the ports differs. So something is messed up. So the moment the store dev tools are not enabled, it takes it from the other tab. All right, so for example, let's try to close this one. Yeah, you see I closed that tab and now we don't see any store. So we don't have the UI, we don't have anything in the store. Why we don't have anything in the store here? It's just because we didn't import the store dev tools module the same way we did in the other one. Okay, so let's copy that configuration of the store dev tools module. Okay, and we said we need to add it after the store module, right? Let's import the isDevMod. This one, as we noticed, that IDE struggles to find it, so let's help it a bit by pasting it here, and we know that this is part of the store dev tools. And now let's save, go back to the browser. All right, and now you see it's green and we can see our store. So we see our books and our collection, and we see the initial state. All right, that empty array here and here. Okay, so this is the state that we have at the initialization of our app. Now you see, okay, it is actually useful because we can see at least that the configuration of the store was done properly. Now if we want to test our actions, you will need to implement those buttons and everything, and read from the store to see if the buttons, let's reopen now, since we have our dev tools enabled in both of them, we should not have any conflict. All right, so this one shows the store for that one, and that one shows I still messed up. You see it showed the action of the other one. So let's try to close those dev tools, inspect again. Yeah, still there are some conflicts between both tabs, so better to have only one tab open. So yes, so here we have, let's close this one, let's close that. All right, so we have yeah, what I wanted to show you is that to test our store, you'd say, okay, now we need to implement the UI to be able to read from the bookstore so that we can display that array here, to add the buttons, implement the dispatch of the actions of adding the button to the book to the collection, and removing the book from the collection, and also here reading from the collection part of the store to see if the addition and the removal are working fine, which is quite a lot of work. However, all of that if you want to test if the store is working fine, but we don't need to do that. That's the beauty of the dev tools. Okay, as long as you already know your IDs and everything, so let me close this tab so that they don't conflict. As long as we know the name of our actions and the type of the payload that we should dispatch, we can do everything even without any UI using the dispatcher. Okay, and we don't need to read from the store because we can directly read from the store here in the DevTools. All right, so let's go to our actions, and we see that we have this source, which is, as I mentioned, that convention with the square bracket. Okay, so let's mimic the fact that we had an API call. All right, and let's add something to the books store. Okay, so let's use the books API. Okay, in the type here, let's add those square brackets, put the books API and then a space, and then let's copy the name retrieved book lists. All right, here retrieved book list. Now this is not enough because that action, if you remember, it has an array of books. So let's look at our model, what it needs at least. Okay, it needs an ID, volume info, and this is string and an array of string. Okay, so we know how it should look like. So let's just copy this. Okay, let's come back to our DevTools and let's create now a payload. All right, and paste this. Let me, yeah, it cannot, fortunately cannot make it bigger. Anyway, ID, let's give an ID, it's a string, so we need the quotes. Let's give one. The title, let's call it my first book, for example. And the authors, we need an array of string. Okay, so array will have only one author. Let's call it myself. All right, so we have, yeah, let's just move this a little bit to the right so that it's fine. Yeah, perfect. So we have our action, retrieved book list, and we said that action is supposed to impact this books part of the store or slice of the store. So let's try to dispatch it, and we have an error, it seems. Let's see if there is something in the console. Unexpected token. Yeah, sorry, because I copied the interface. I copied the interface, and the interface was using even though, sorry, we need extra token. Action, books API, type, payload. Volume info, authors. Ah, there is still one here. Yeah. Still not, so just error. Volume info, payload, ID, volume info. That should be good. Should be good. Let's just copy this to be on the safe side. Let's look at the shape of the actions that are that is dispatched here in the final. We could, by the way, copy the exact so here we could copy the exact data that we have here. The action is books API retrieved book list, so the type is correct. The type is correct, and the payload. We need the books property. We need the books property. The payload is an object of books. So this is what we missed actually. The payload is books, and then the array of books. Okay, we directly put one book, whereas it's expecting an array. So let's come back to our, let's remove this. Okay, we have this here. So the payload is a JSON called, and I opened one, and I need to close another one here. Let's close this one here. All right, books, and we have, should be an array, all right, of books. So an array, let me move this a bit to the right. Okay, all right, perfect. And now we have our array of books under the books property. This is our payload. All right, we should be good. Still not, something is still missing. Let's see. No, the console is not helping much. Okay, let's come back to our other tab. Let's see. Redux Dev Tools, retrieved books. We have a JSON with the property called books. That is an array that has a bunch of things, but the most important are the ID, volume info, title, and authors. So for the authors, we properly added an array. So right, did we? Yes, we added an array, so we should be good. Should be good. So yeah, something is missing, but the type books API retrieved book list, that's the proper type that we used. They're not using payload anymore. They used to use payload, so they're not using payload anymore. So actually, instead of payload, we could have just yeah, because here we are using props. So with the props, you don't use payload. That's in the previously in NgRx it was like that, but we can directly put the books there. So we could have actually directly put that before, but it's fine. Let's remove the payload. Okay, and let's remove this one. Hopefully we should be good now, and we are. Let's close this. Yeah, so we have an empty array, right? Now let's dispatch. Oops, what's happening? It was just working. Let's close the tab, reopen it, Redux Dev Tools, paste it. I have the type, we have the books. We have our books here. The book has an ID, volume info. Yeah, see. Books array. As the books. Sorry, the action as the books. The type. Should be good. We should have everything. Should have everything we need. Volume info, type, books. Something is, let's see if we take it and put it in the other tab. Here it's working perfectly fine. We can see that it's added. So our model is the action is proper. So maybe just something here we need to, let's refresh, copy, refresh, go to action, custom action, alright. Okay, I just needed a refresh at the end. Okay, so you see that we are able to dispatch the action. That's the first thing. And the action is doing a change on the state. You see that it added an element to the books, right? You see, now in our books state, we have an element that is added, which is the data that we added, right? So we can add another one. Let's put to my second book. All right, let's dispatch it. Actually, if you remember, that action does a reset, right? That action, when we looked at the books reducer, it doesn't add it to the array. So they have to be, both of them, they have to be added for us to have two books. All right, so let's copy this element. All right, and let's add it here. Okay, or let me do a Control-C, it will be faster. It will allow me to get the first one, and then the other one is in the clipboard, so I can just add it here. Perfect. And now we have our two books, right? We have our two books under the books part of the store. Perfect. Now, so we can clearly see that our initial action as well as its reducer is working fine. Now we want to test the other actions. So they were part of books, not books API, and one was called add book, and here it was far simpler because the payload was just book ID. All right, it was book ID. We'll double check, but so it was far simpler, and the book ID was a string with the ID. So here we have the action. Let me close the curly brace. We have the action that impacts the collection store, the one I said maybe would have been better if they used collection. And we want to add my first book, which has the ID 1, to the collection. All right, let's try this. And it seems to work fine. Let's see. And in our collection, we have the ID of the first one. Right? And now let's add the second one. All right. Let's see the state, and we have the second one. Now let's remove the second one. And we were able to remove the second one. So without touching any Angular component, without touching any template, any component.ts file or any component class file, nothing at all, we are able to test our store and the logic in our store. All right? You could even go further when you will work with effects that trigger API calls or whatever, or any side effect. You could also dispatch actions to test those effects and to see whether they have an impact on the network and they trigger an API call, etc., etc. And after that API call, what is happening, which type of reaction they dispatch to update the store. All of that you can test it without having to code any component at all, any UI at all. You can test it just with the Redux Dev Tools. All right. So that's perfect. This tells us that everything is working fine in terms of store, so we can confidently start implementing the component. So it's convenient because you can have some devs who would work in the store, all right? So, and the other devs will work in the UI, and then you can easily integrate everything. All right. So now let's go on the next steps of the tutorial, which most likely will deal with the components. But before working with the components will have to read from the store. We didn't need the for that they will need selectors. We didn't need selectors because by default, while using the Redux Dev Tools, you are able to see the store completely. So we don't need a selector to read from it. However, from the code point of view, we'll want to read parts of the store every time we need something. So for that, we need to define selectors. All right. So they are asking us to create a books.selectors.ts file where they will put actually the selectors that are both for the books and the collections. Usually when your app will grow, you will want a file just for the collection part and a file just for the books part, because those are two different parts of the store. The same way they separated the books reducers and the collection reducers. And you would also want, as I said initially, to have two files for the actions. So usually you have groups, you have folder, one folder for books, one folder for collections. That's how you will have it actually when the app scales. All right, so let's create our selectors file here, and let's copy its content. All right, and as usual, let's take a minute to understand what is there. So here we have 3 selectors, okay, and the last one is particular because it relies on the 2 first ones. It's very, very important. If you code this way, it will allow you to ease a lot the work in your components and avoiding to make some issues and complexifying your way with a lot of reactive programming by using these selectors that combine multiple selectors. All right, so let's forget about this one for a moment, okay, and let's look at the simpler ones. Okay, so for these ones, actually we don't, if we were going to read from the store, you don't need them. You could directly, the same as it was done in the first tutorial, you could directly read from the components by using this .store.select and directly give the the ID or the key, what we call the key of that slice of the store. Okay, this.store.select and double quotes books. Okay, this.store.select double quotes collection. All right, but here in this case we will need to code a more complex selector that will need these two, so we use that, so that it refactors actually that, and we don't need to know exactly what is the key. We will have less chance to make a mistake if we want to use the selector. So you can just do this.store.select and then pass this constant. Okay, so how a selector is created? By using the create feature selector to create those selectors related to slices of the store. All right, we give the type. We know that the one of the books is supposed to return to us a read-only array of book. All right, and here we give the key. Which key? The key that we defined in the app module. This key, very important. That's the same key that we see in our dev tools. Okay, books or collection. So that's the key that you give at that step. All right, so this will return to us the full data that we have under books in the store. So it will give us that array of books. All right, here the same thing is being done, but for the collections. Okay, and here it's the type is a read-only array of strings. Okay, let's make it this way. It will be easier to read. All right, and the key here again, collection. Fine, perfect. Now what we want is that, if you recall, in this tutorial, when we add the books to the collection, what is being added actually in the store is just the key of books, right? Not the full books. The books part of the store that consists on this has all the data that came from the API, and mainly the data that we need here for the UI. But for the collection, we have only the IDs, and we said it's a good way to do, instead of duplicating the data, or for example, when we want to dispatch the book, to dispatch all the data, because then you end up with the data being duplicated, so it's prone to bugs. All right, you want just a reference to that data. You want the data in one place only and refer to it using keys. All right, the problem is, as you can see here, we will want to display all the data, meaning the title and the authors. Okay, and of course we'll need the ID, because when we want to remove a book from the collection, you see that the remove book action needs the ID, right? So it's an information that is hidden here, but that we need when we want to click on that button. All right, so by the way, even Angular normally it's hidden here, but Angular is actually not hiding it in the DOM. If we inspect the DOM, we should be able to see some information that should contain that ID. So for the case of the last book that we have in the collection, OMR, so yeah, no, it's not shown here. So there are of course some information here that most likely NgRx will bind with that code behind the scene. All right, so anyway, what I mean is that the components will need in its ng for loop to know about that ID, so that when we click on the button, we call the method with that ID. So the information will have to be there. Maybe with the Angular extension, should be able to see that. Let's try and see. We have our app book collection. We have our books. All right, so we obviously we know here we are passing all the information, so we know that that component will have it. You can see that we have the ID, we have actually all the data that came from the API, but it will be necessary because we will need to have that data, so that when we dispatch with the ID. Okay, so anyway, the ID we have it, so it's not an issue because it's part of the collection store, right? So the ID is there, the ID is there, but we are displaying these two here. So for that, we'll need to cross the data using the key from the collection, right? The keys from the collection and the data from the books by using the ID. All right, so that's where that selector comes in play. So here we want a selector that will give us not only the strings, because this one will only give us an array of strings. Okay, we want a selector that will give us an array of books, but not the same as this one, because this one has all the books, is all the books that we got from the API. Here we want the books that are in real time in the collection, and you saw that the collection can change. We can add, remove, so we want a selector that will allow us to observe that part and to have all the books. Okay, so that's why here we use this select books that will give us all the books, and the select collection state that will give us just the IDs of the books that are in the collection, right? And then we have an arrow function that will have as many parameters as the selectors that we had before. So here we had 2 selectors, so we have 2 parameters. Okay, you could have also more in case your selector is taking some parameters in itself, but it's a more complex subject that we can touch on in another part. But here we have a simple selector that combines 2 parts of the store. So since we have these 2 parts, we need here at least 2 parameters. Okay, and then what we do, we loop over the collection, okay, using the map array operator, and we have its ID, and then we go in the books, and then we find the book that has the same ID as the ID that we have here. Okay, so we are transforming this collection from a collection of strings to a collection of books. Okay, so that's what we are getting at the end. Okay, all right. So you can also see here that it's a memoized selector. We can talk about memoization later, but and you see that it's an array of books here, whereas here it's an array of strings. Okay, so that's it for the selector. So the components, will need them to start reading from the store. All right, so now that we have all the selectors we need, so we need this selector to show the collections and this selector to show the books, right? So we have everything we need, so we should be able to work on the UI. So let's come back to the tutorial. So we have our selectors. Yeah, so before working on the UI, they want us to, so here we're going to go a bit fast on this step here, because it has nothing to do with NgRx. If you see, even in the imports, there is absolutely no import from NgRx. There are imports from RxJS, right, for reactive programming. Why? Because they are using the HTTP client, which returns an observable. Okay, so this is it's not observable related to NgRx, because the store also is an observable in itself. But here nothing is related at all to NgRx, so it's a service that they want us to copy to make the call to the Google Books API with those parameters, those query params, to get those 5 books. All right, the max result of 5, and we will get those 5 books. Okay, yeah, and that's it. So that will be in a method, so that we can call that method to make that call. So the action is not dispatched here after we make the call. Okay, so let's take this, and you see, by the way, even the service is not part of the state folder that they told us to create. It's under the book list folder. So let's come in our book list where we created our model, and let's create our service here. Let's copy the content. All right, so it's a service that is injected in root, so it's available all over the app. Okay, we use dependency injection to inject in it the Angular HTTP client. All right, we implement a method called getBooks that returns an observable of an array of books. Okay, and then we use the HTTP client to use HTTP get method, right? And here we have the type that is what we want to get from that response. So it will be an object of items of books. So here, this is what you see when you look at the response. You see, we have an object of items. Okay, there are also some other information, but they mainly focus on the items part, because that's the one that is an array of all of that data. All right, and then when we are getting that data, we are just doing a transformation to get from the full object only the items. So this one, because the response will give us an object that has a property called items, whereas the method, we want to return an observable of the array directly. So we don't want an object of a property that is an array. We directly want the array. So we just take the book dot item, or if we're not getting anything, we return an empty array. Okay, so yeah, this is the service they want us to implement. So let's save it. Come back to our tutorial. Now they want us to create some components. Okay, so we have 2 components, book lists and book collection. So obviously the book list is this one and the book collection is that one. All right, so let's create those files. So they want under book list folder the book list component, and they want a folder called book collection for the book collection component. So we already have the book list folder. Let's create the book collection folder. All right, and now let's create the files for the book list component. All right, that's the template, and that's the class file, and let's create the template of the book collection component and the class file. Perfect. So then we are going to refer to these components later with their selector. So again, for this first part, there will be no NgRx involved. So we're going to go pretty fast on that because it's pure Angular. All right. And actually, Angular is a prerequisite to NgRx. So we have the template here of the book list component. Let's copy it. Sorry, I'm not in the proper file. The book list component. Alright, so which is this component here. By the way, I have the Angular Dev Tools, so we can clearly see here is the app book list and app book collection. Okay, let's add some elements. Yeah, let's refresh. Sometimes, yeah, this is the app book list and the app book collection here. Since it's empty, let's add some elements and we can see the two components. So the book list is this one and the book component is this one and the app component is that one. All right, so the app book list has an input here, right, and an output, all right, which is the add. Okay, and the books is the books that will be passed by the parent, because all the logic related to the store will be done in this tutorial in the app component, in the parent. So these two are not going to deal with the store at all. So that's why I said we're gonna go pretty fast in that part. So anyway, we have our templates. Okay, so as you can see, it's a div that will loop over the list of books, right, and it will display the title, the authors, all right, and it will have a button, and the button will emit the ID of the book, all right. So pure simple Angular. All right, so let's look at the class file. Let's copy it, paste it here. All right, so it refers to CSS that they are not giving us here. So I mean, we could copy it from the other project, but let's just ignore that for now. We don't really care about CSS for this tutorial. So we have our book list component class, right, that has the books property that we will get as an input, all right, that is interpolated here with the data that it wants, right, and we have an event emitter. We don't have any method implemented in the class file that will emit the event. Since it's quite simple, it's directly done in the template. But my advice, pure Angular point of view, avoid putting any logic in the template. Try to always have a method in the class and keep the template as light as possible. All right, but here, since it's quite simple, they went with that way. All right, so yeah, here pure Angular, so nothing specific to NgRx. So let's just save this component and let's move on to the book collection component. So again, no need to spend much time here. So a lot like the books one. So same thing, we are looping through an array of books that we will get most likely from the parent. Then we are displaying those books and we have a remove button that will emit. So for that we need the data, the TS code. All right, let's move TS code, same thing, quite simple. Let's comment the CSS book collection component. All right, we're getting the books as an input and we have an event emitter that is emitted from the template here with the ID inside the for loop. Perfect. So now that we have these two components, we will refer to them in the app template and declare them there also, so that we can test them in the test the UI. All right, so that's what they're asking us to do here. So let's just copy all of that code. Again here, pure Angular. Sorry, let's go to our app HTML. Let's keep that header. So we have the books, we have app book list, app collection. Of course, we have some errors here because we need to play a bit in the module file, right? To declare these two components that we added. So let's do that to get rid of those errors. Let's go in our module file, and I already had the comma, and let's add all missing imports. All right, now if we come back to our app component HTML, those errors went. We still have some errors here because they refer to some properties that we didn't yet define in the app component class. All right, so we can already test our UI before having those properties by just removing them from here, as well as the methods that are supposed to be called when we're getting event from these children. You remember we defined two event emitters, right? So here they are defining some methods where the code will be implemented to react to these events. So for now, let's just have another version of this code. Let's comment out this one, have another version, okay, that will where we remove this and this. All right, two, and didn't save the module file, that's why we have some errors here, and now we're compiling successfully. All right, so everything is perfect. Now let's go in our components, and here we have our components. There we can see actually this is not part of the components. If you see, it's part of the app components. All right, you see books and my collection, so it doesn't show anything, but we should, since we don't have any array yet, we cannot see any book, but hopefully, yeah. So now we can see our app book list and app collection. They're not showing here, but because they are empty, but we have those two components loaded, right? And you can see the same as we were looking at here, those inputs and books, etc. It's just the arrays are empty here. All right, so our components are properly loaded, so we can now move on to the TS part to define those observables, because when you see the dollar sign, it means that we are dealing with observables, and implement the methods also that react to the add and remove. Okay, so let's just uncomment this and let's get rid of that. Let's copy the code, or the skeleton of the code of the class file. All right, so let's look first at our version of the class file. So the class file is already there, however its body is empty, right? So we will need to work on the body and as well as the constructor. Okay, so let's copy the code that is inside the body of the class, so from here to here. Okay, and let's paste it. Fine. Now we see that the selectors that we created are defined here. So the one for the books and the one for the book collection, if you remember, that was cross taking the data from the books and the collections for the IDs. So this one returns the array of books that are in the collection, and this one the array of books that are in the bookstore. Perfect. And here we have the actions. All right, but normally they should give, yeah, they used to have a version of the tutorial before those before that being implemented. Maybe I deleted too much of the I deleted too much from the tutorial, from the version that we download. But I remember actually we have a skeleton. I deleted too much. No, actually they removed. Actually before the skeleton had those property, or in the tutorial they were giving a first version before implementing the call to the selectors and anyway. So yeah, this is a new version as far as I know, unless we missed some part, but this is a new version where they are directly giving the code of the app component .ts. Before they were providing methods, which I felt was better. They were providing methods with these parts empty, and then we have to do the work to implement the rest. Okay, but anyway, fine, no problem. So let's look into the code. So here we have our selectors, we have actions, the service here that we created, right? We have the store that is being injected, and we have here the call to the service to call the API. And you remember that method returns an observable, so we have to subscribe to it. So this is RxJS, not NgRx. Okay, and when we subscribe to it, then we dispatch that initial action. Okay, so let's fix the imports first. Add all missing imports, so we are good. All right. Here obviously the errors disappeared, right, because the methods are implemented and the properties are there. So you see that here we are passing an array of books into our app book list, and an array of books also to our app collection. But those are actually coming from some observables, books and books collection, and we are subscribing to those observables in the template using the pipe async pipe. All right. So and then when we receive the add event or the remove event from the children, because the children contain the buttons in each for loop, we are getting the add with the ID and the remove with the ID. So we call those methods with the $event that contains the IDs, the ID for each case. Okay. So our template is fine, our TS is fine. So now how are these the data read from the store? So the data is read from the store using these properties, books and book collections, right, that are using the selectors that we created with this way, this.store.select, and then we pass the selectors that we create, and automatically it will give us an observable of that data. All right. And on the onAdd and onRemove, what we do this.store.dispatch, and we call the actions that we created. You remember those two actions are under the group book actions, and the name is intuited from the string of the type add space book that we created, converted to camel case. All right, and we have to pass the props here, which is an object that contains a property called book ID. Okay, so either you do it this way or you do it this way. So it's just a shortcut to do this. You just directly pass the book ID. It means that the property and the constant from which we take the variable from which we take the value are the same. All right. On the remove, it's the same, just with the remove, right? In the constructor, we have to inject our service that makes the API call, and we inject the store. All right, and in the NgOnInit, if you remember, we noticed that when we load the app, when we reload the app, right? That one that's already done. When we load it, there is an API call that is being made at load, right? So the API call is being made, and an action is being dispatched. The action, actually, it's going too fast, but the action is being dispatched after the API call is being made. All right. So yeah, to know that, it's quite simple. I mean, we clearly see it from the code, but if I put a breakpoint here and let's refresh, you see that at that step the API call is being made, but in the dev tools we have nothing, right? The action is not being dispatched. Okay, so it's after the API call has been made and is done that we dispatch that action. All right, now we have the action that is being dispatched. Anyway, so that is happening at load, so that's why it's implemented in the NgOnInit. Okay, it could have been done in the constructor because it doesn't rely to any input that comes from any parent. We are in the top parent, we are in the app component, so you see that we only depend on some stuff that is injected that we have access to in the constructor. So this book services and then this store dispatch, and both are in the constructor. So in these cases, I like to put the code that can be done in the constructor to put it in the constructor, since we don't depend on any input. All right, the moment you depend on an input, yeah, then you move it to the NgOnInit if required. But if not, better put it in the constructor. It's more explicit and shows that doesn't rely on any parent-child communication, but only on injected dependencies. All right, so we have our book service. We will get the books. We are getting an observable from that, so we subscribe to the observable, and we pass an arrow function to that subscribe method as a parameter, and that arrow function is a function that takes books, because the book services is going to return to us. The get book method is going to give us an observable of an array of books. So meaning here we are having a property called books, which is an array of book. All right, and when we are getting it, we dispatch the action books API action dot retrieved book list. That one is going to, if you recall, trigger that reducer that will override the empty state with the new array of books. All right, so we pass here, since you remember the payload of the action is an object with the property books, that is the array of books, so we have to follow that. That's what we pass here, an object with the property called books that is an array of books, because that's what we are getting from that observable. It's an array of books, as you can see. All right, so now let's save the files. All right, so let's see if everything is working fine. So in terms of compilation, it's perfect. Now let's close this tab. This is the final one, which is 4200. Let's refresh, and we seem to have some issue. Okay, yeah, related to no provider for HTTP client. So HTTP client has to be, since we don't have a module and next to the book services, the book services is a service directly injected in the app provided in root. We need to import the HTTP client module in the app module, because we have only need to import. All right, perfect. So now we have our list. You see that because we didn't import that CSS, that's why we have returned to the line. Maybe that CSS file is inlining everything, but we don't care about that for now. Let's open our dev tools. So we see obviously the API call was successful, right? Because we're getting some data. So we have our API call that was triggered, it's successful. Then we have our retrieved book list, which was successfully dispatched and successfully updated our store, because obviously we saw the data here, so the data is there. Now let's test our add to collection. So we are adding the collection and the remove from the collection, so it seems to be working perfectly fine. All right, so let's see the state here of the collection, and we have those two. Let's add, scroll down. All right, let's add. It's painful. If we try to add the same one, it won't add it because we are checking whether it's there or not, and then the removes are working fine also. All right, so everything is working perfectly fine, and as I said, this code could absolutely work in the constructor because it doesn't depend on any input or anything. All right, let's save, compiled, refresh, and you see that everything is working fine. The load was done properly, and the action was dispatched to put the data in the store properly, even though the work was in the constructor. The code was in the constructor. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the tutorial. It could be enhanced by those CSS that they added. Maybe need to copy it from the final example. They are not providing them in the text of the tutorial itself. As I said, this should be able to be changed to an include. Should be more functional. State does include, yeah, just to require the parameters. Here is the book ID. So this one, the goal of it is to see that we cannot add it multiple times, and you see it working perfectly fine. We are trying to add it, but there is a proper check. So better use the includes, and ideally what you would want for your app to scale, you will want an action file for the collection here. In my opinion, they should have called this one action collections, sorry, collection, and this they should have called it collection. All right, now this could just be called not API, but be generic to everything related to the books. So they called it books API action to I assume to differentiate it from the books that was here, but it could be called this way. All right, and I would, in my opinion, the action should be agnostic of what triggered the action. In that case, it was the fact that we retrieved them from the API. It doesn't matter whether it retrieved them from the API. It should be called add book list to books. Okay. and here add book to collection. I mean, the fact that it's collection, it should be enough. Normally we should not need to repeat that, but add book list, it's obvious. We'll add the book list to the bookstore, and here add the book to the collection store. So, or remove the book from the collection store. So it should be obvious. Again, since it impacts the collection store, right? Because you saw that the reducers related to that were even the file was called collection reducer, right? So what triggered the action doesn't matter, all right? It's what the action creates, what the action impacts. So even though it's from the books list that we clicked on add, it doesn't matter. We could have another add somewhere else. What matters is that the add will impact the collection, all right? So in my opinion, the naming is not that good. So the actions should have been named this way. All right. So obviously here there are a bunch of issues, but just the editor should help us because of the renaming that we did. So we should just remove this, add book list, and here add book list. That's the disadvantage of using the groups, create action group with this way that will intuit the constant name from the type, is that you have to go manually and fix the errors. Whereas if we used just the create action, which is this way of doing, export const, it would be called add book list, for example, right? And it will be create action, let's create action from NgRx store, right? And here you give it the type, all right, and the props, if there are any props. So here, for example, the action will be called, but then you have to manually add this. Usually do this, that's the convention, right? And you do this. All right. So in that case, obviously, if I had renamed this, it would rename it automatically to the. Sorry, I should remove this. It would rename it automatically to that. Okay, and after you add the props the same way it was done here. All right. So that's another way of doing it. All right, so let's save that. This one is not saved. Having some errors. Component to retrieve book list. Still the app component is referring. I didn't save it. Didn't save all the file. All right, so yeah, everything's working fine. So yeah, and usually you would have some folders here under the state. You would have a folder called books, all right, and you would have a folder here called collection, right? And this one would move here. Okay, started to update the imports to fix the errors. All right, and the books reducer would move here. All right, and the books action would move here, even though it contains also the collection actions. We're gonna deal with that. Let's copy that here and let's give it another name, such as collection actions. All right, and normally these actions that are related to the collection, we get rid of them from here. All right, and here we remove the one related to books, and we take this one here. Obviously this won't find the collection here because they are not under book action, so let's just remove that import and let the ID help us. Perfect. We'll face the issue also here. Let's remove this import and let's re-import it with the IDE. Perfect. You'd have something like this, and for the selectors, same thing. This one would go here. All right, let's create a copy of it. Let's call it collection selectors. All right, let's move it here. Perfect. And let's remove everything related to the collection from here. Let's remove the unused imports. All right, and here let's remove the one related to books and let's import it because we rely on it. Let's remove the unused imports. Perfect. Let's save this file, and we need to refer to the selector from here in our app component. So let's remove this import and let the ID help us. All right, so ideally to scale you'd have something like that. Okay, each part of the store, let's check. Okay, we have some issues here under collection reducer. Let's look into it. No, just not saved, sorry. We should be good. Yeah, we are good. All right, let's check. So here our collection is working fine. Remove. Okay, so this is how it should be. Books collections. All right, this one impacted the bookstore. That's why it goes with books. This one impacts the collection store, so we call it collection. So this is a proper naming. All right. Not books API and books. So this one relates to the collection, and the name of the action here should not have been retrieved. It doesn't matter. We could reuse the same action to add, even though we didn't retrieve from an API. All right, so it should have been called add book list to the bookstore because this is what it did. All right, this is the proper naming, and since we have these two parts of the store, books and collections, you have ideally two folders with their own actions. So just the actions related to the collection, the reducers related to the collection, the selectors related to the collection, and nothing prevents us to, in these selectors, import selectors from the books. This is what we did here. All right, but since it's more related to the collection, this select book collection is more related to this part because we loop through the collections and we just enrich the collection with the data that we got from the books. So its place is with the collection selector here, with this feature selector. All right, and you will have your reducers here, this one related to the collection and this one related to the books. So that's the way it should be, and then you might have some effects that would make some API calls. All right, for example, the use case of the service here that made the API call, since it's related to the books, you could have an effect that would be here, and in our component, instead of doing making the API call and subscribing and then updating the store, the goal of the effect will be to do that. We'll just dispatch an action here without any payload, actually, because we just the same, because we didn't pass any parameters to get books, right? So we just want to make the call, and the effect will make the call use a switch map to subscribe to, because an effect subscribes first to an actions observable, and then you switch map to subscribe to the observable that you get from the HTTP client, and then it will dispatch, or it doesn't even need to dispatch, it just need to returns an action. The store will automatically know that if an effect returns something, it's by default an action, so the store will call the reducer that is related to that action, which is the reducer related to adding books to the list. So this is a good example to be made in an effect. Okay, so in that case, that effect will go here. It will be a books.effects.ts file. Okay. Yeah, so that there's some small enhancements here to show you how to deal with that when you are at scale. All right, so that's pretty much it for this walkthrough. There are indeed a lot of details that were covered here, because we handled the dev tools, we changed a bit the code, we enhanced some stuff, but that's pretty much it. We defined some actions, we added the reducers, books and collection. We dealt with the use case where we create a selector with two different part of the store. So that's the part related to the selectors. We registered our states, and I told you about those keys that are in the module file are very important. Those are the ones that you use in the feature selectors and the one that you see in the Redux Dev Tools, books and collection. We created two Angular components. We created that service that fetches the Google Books API. We injected the store and the Google Books API in our component to dispatch the actions. Yeah, that covers the walkthrough. It's quite more advanced than the initial one for the getting started, but still it covers a very small, just the basics and the most important parts of NgRx. There are still effects, there are entity stores with adapters, etc., to deal with the collections of components, collections of elements of data. Yeah, there are many other things. There is the CLI also that is convenient to generate actually stores and effects and actions, etc. The same way you would generate components in Angular or whatever. Yeah. So that's it for the walkthrough training.